Ah, that is a good cup of joe. Who knew the Brotherhood makes such damn good coffee? I hope it's not radioactive, though.
Shadow Marshal. I was just looking for you.
Scribe Riley, to what do I owe the pleasure?
The Elder is quite pleased by your recovery of the B-52's blueprints from Barksdale Air Force Base. With these specs, we can finally begin constructing strategic bombers for our Lancer Corps.
The pleasure is all mine, though I'm quite surprised that the aircraft was still in service up to the Great War.
Yes, it may be an old aircraft, but it is far from obsolete. Their exceptional range and payload will make them invaluable for our air power. And once they are operational, we can finally proceed to the Midwest.
Oh, you'll be able to reach much farther than the Midwest, Scribe Riley. Well, I guess even in this world, the buff manages to outlive everything.
Come again, the buff?
It's just an acronym for my world.
Anywho, as promised by the Elder, a brand new T-60 armor is ready to be shipped to your starship.
Excellent. Please relay my gratitude to the Elder when you see him.
The Elder always honors his word, Shadow Marshal. Ad Victoriam.
Oh boy, I can't wait to give it a field test when I return to my galaxy. Though, I am gonna have to give it some modifications to ensure EVA capabilities. If you get my gist. Oh, hi there. Didn't see you coming. I swear, you guys always manage to sneak up on me during the middle of conversations. Anyhow, you've arrived just in time at this facility, where you will begin your induction process. What induction, you say? Well, aren't you all here to join the Brotherhood of Steel? Look at all these impressive power armors lined up behind me. Don't any of you want to suit up in these bad boys and kick ass in the wastelands like the Iron Man? Don't you want to scavenge the wastelands not for food, but for long-lost pre-war technology that will finally allow you to experience some semblance of modern life? Aren't you all here to safeguard these modern technologies, especially ones of mass destruction, and to keep them in good hands to prevent another apocalypse from occurring? No? Well, in that case, don't let the door hit you on the way out. But I would be remiss not to mention a pack of super mutants that are prowling just outside, sniffing around for any wastelanders to hunt. You all know what they do to captives. Exactly, that's what I thought. It's either the Brotherhood or helplessly wandering the irradiated landscapes. But hey now, relax. It ain't so bad here. Besides, this is only a trial run, and it's not even guaranteed that you will be accepted. Even if some chapters of the Brotherhood have started recruiting outsiders, they're still quite selective about who they accept into their order. The Brotherhood is not like the NCR, where you just pay your dues, pledge allegiance to the Republic, and hand it a piece of paper. Nah, in the Brotherhood, you need to prove yourself. You need to prove that you are of actual use to its core mission of safeguarding and regulating technology. If you're a particularly brainy whiz, you may be able to participate in studying and maintaining pre-war tech under the scribes. If you're particularly skilled with a joystick and can handle multiple G's in the air, you may be the perfect fit as a pilot for the Lancers. Or, if you don't care about sophistication and just want to shoot and brawl like a jarhead, you may be the perfect fit for the Knights. But before you choose any of those paths, you first need to know what you're actually getting into, and we shall begin by exploring the story behind the Brotherhood. Its roots, struggles, and the eventual vision that led the Brotherhood to where it stands now. Albert Einstein once had a saying, "I know not what weapons World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." Although this quote isn't entirely accurate in Fallout's wastelands, his rationale is still very much relevant. After the Great War of 2077, the land that was once the United States remains devastated, with many of its cities hollowed and once green landscapes now barren. Yet, despite the Great War's catastrophic nuclear destruction, the surviving wastelanders fight with much more than just sticks and stones, as many pre-war weapons and technologies have survived and still function. Weapons ranging from laser rifles to colossal titans that can level entire cities, which are quickly becoming reclaimed by the survivors. As generations have passed, the wastelands have slowly recovered to pre-war levels, with entire nation-states being established. But with such re-emergence of civilizations also comes with a resurgence of warfare and industrial scales. And with the possibilities of nuclear warheads and other weapons of mass destruction hidden somewhere in the wastelands, we would be remiss to disregard another repeat of the Great War. Then US Army Captain Roger Maxson was determined to prevent that, as he proclaimed a new order to a surviving unit in the Lost Hills Doomsday Bunker. A new order to preserve, guide, and rebuild civilization. The Brotherhood of Steel. After surviving the nuclear strikes, Maxon reflected on his experiences before the Great War and the general state of humanity that led to the ill-fated Doomsday. Upon witnessing the resulting devastation and the enormous setback humanity has suffered, Maxon concluded that he and his men had to do much more than just survive the new wastelands. Maxon was determined to not only rebuild civilization, but also to prevent the mistakes of the past from repeating themselves. And he would do so by dedicating the new Brotherhood of Steel towards the preservation of all technology and human knowledge, so that one day they could be used to build a better world under the new Brotherhood's guiding hand. Despite the loss of faith in the Stars and Stripes, Roger Maxon's new and hopeful vision not only reinvigorated his men's will to survive, but also gave a renewed sense of purpose. And as the Brotherhood increasingly collected relics of the past, it became a bastion of advanced technology in a world that regressed centuries. This in turn allowed the Brotherhood to dominate much of the wastelands, becoming one of its major power players. However, after Roger Maxon's death in 2135, the Brotherhood would slowly drift away from its original vision, with successive leaders taking the Order towards a more isolationist direction and prioritizing the hoarding of technology for its own sake, as opposed to aiding in the rebuilding of the wastelands. Eventually, the Brotherhood would come to resemble the militaristic order it's commonly known for today, with their fixation on technology bordering on divine worship. Yet, Maxon's original vision was not completely forgotten. As the Brotherhood began expanding across the lands of the former United States, some local chapters of the Brotherhood would begin deviating away from the founding chapter in Lost Hills. Some eventually parted ways entirely after being excommunicated by the founding chapter, allowing them to forge their own doctrine and path in the wastelands. While some like the Mojave chapter maintained their isolationist nature, some like the Capital Wasteland chapter would revive Maxon's original principles and dedicate themselves to rebuilding civilization by sharing their technology with outsiders, as well as even letting some of them join their ranks. Some, such as the East Coast Brotherhood, under Elder Arthur Maxon, would take a more pragmatic and middle ground approach by prioritizing technological primacy while also allowing outside recruitment. And that is where our next story begins, as we observe an unassuming former wastelander known as James, who was recently recruited into the Brotherhood. Before we follow James's story, however, we must first understand that recruiting within the Brotherhood depends on the various chapters around the country. As stated earlier, some chapters such as the Mojave are very isolationist, where they restrict membership within their ranks and rely on internal reproduction to maintain their population. While the rationale behind the isolationism was to maintain ideological purity and gatekeep their technological bastion, it also led towards hardened dogma and stagnation, which did not serve well when outside powers such as the NCR began catching up in prowess. For the Mojave chapter, the results spoke for themselves at the Battle of Helios 1. Meanwhile, others such as the Capital Wastelands chapter would allow open recruitment, giving any non-mutated wastelanders a chance to prove themselves to join the Brotherhood. Although this alleviated manpower concerns, some within opposed such lenient openness, fearing it would dilute the Brotherhood's traditions and deviate away from its original vision. These dissenters would eventually become the Brotherhood outcasts. Regardless, such is the nature of all organizations who expand before splintering into different subgroups, who begin to develop their own identity and traditions. In closed chapters such as the Mojave, children born into the Brotherhood begin as squires, which is the lowest rank within the order. Just as the ancient Spartans of antiquity, squires from birth are raised, educated, and trained for their future within the order. Until squires are able to reach adulthood, they are not permitted to participate in any combat operations, with their roles instead being relegated to performing menial labor and acting as assistants to any superiors assigned towards, just as their counterparts from feudal times. Once squires reach adulthood, finish their training, and complete the rite of passage rituals, only then would they finally become full members of the Brotherhood. Meanwhile, those who are not born into the Brotherhood, yet still wish to join any chapter that allows open recruitment, are broadly considered hopefuls. Once again, even open recruitment methods vary between different chapters, but in the case of the East Coast Brotherhood, an outsider must be sponsored by existing members, often a paladin who sees potential in any wastelanders for the Order. Even then, however, acceptance is not a guarantee, as the Elder ultimately has the final say. For any hopefuls that are accepted, they would undergo a similar process as squires, receiving rigorous training, education, and a probationary period before being fully inducted into the Order, albeit in an accelerated form. And that is how James here begins his journey in the Brotherhood. Once a mere scavenger in the wastelands, James's life would change drastically upon encountering a pack of super mutants on the hunt for him. Fortunately, a Brotherhood paladin would cross paths with him, who proceeded to dispose the super mutants. However, instead of fleeing like most scavengers do, James would aid the paladin by distracting the remaining super mutants pinning down on the paladin before eventually providing an assisted kill. The lone paladin would thank James, introducing himself as Paladin Kovac. Impressed with James's daring act, Paladin Kovac would offer James a chance to join his order, seeing potential in the young man. However, he would only have one chance of this offer. Should he refuse, it would never come again. James would hesitate for a moment. He's heard many stories about the Brotherhood, ranging from altruistic acts for the helpless to cruel acts of stealing and coercion. Regardless, both feared and respected, the Brotherhood called the shots in this part of the wasteland. Despite his reservations about the Brotherhood, one thing was for certain. James was sick of constantly scavenging for food and water, often enduring many nights on an empty stomach. He was sick of constantly moving from one shelter to another, always looking over his shoulder and wondering when he'll be the next victim, just as his late compatriots. Still, despite their dubious morality, if the Brotherhood was the one chance for him to finally escape his miserable life, so be it. So with a quick nod, James accepted. The paladin nodded back before replying in one phrase that would define James's new path.
Ad Victoriam.
As an initiate, most of the quote-unquote training involves education around the ideals and traditions of the Brotherhood, often focusing more on indoctrination. After all, ideological loyalty must be ensured before entrusting the initiates with more practical training. After the educational phase, James goes through all the physical training, not too different from basic military training of the former US Army, covering the usuals from physical training, hand-to-hand combat, marksmanship, and simulated combat exercises, and etc. But since this is Fallout, initiates are also taught in wasteland survival skills, such as scavenging for food and clean water, finding shelter, dealing with hostile humans and mutant creatures. Fortunately for James, as a former wasteland scavenger himself, he excels in this phase and outperforms his fellow class of initiates, which would earn him notice from his instructors. And of course, since this is the Brotherhood and not the NCR, initiates are also provided basic technical training in operating and maintaining technologies beyond just personal firearms. Unfortunately for James, he's not exactly the most tech-savvy individuals, which makes him an unlikely candidate for a scribe. However, that is perfectly fine for James, who's much more inclined and eager to get into action, as opposed to being some math whiz solving equations in a lab. Fortunately, his instructors, including Paladin Kovac, have already determined James's path within the Brotherhood. After months of arduous training and trials by fire, James and his fellow class of initiates would finally graduate and be anointed through the Brotherhood's metallic rituals, at long last becoming a formal member of the Order.
Ad Victoriam.
While many of his fellow graduating initiates part ways to earn advanced technical training within the Scribes or the Lancer Corps, James here will receive his first and shiny combat armor and laser rifle, now known as Knight James. While many new knights are quite eager to jump into a power armor, a freshly graduated knight cannot yet be trusted with something so expensive and delicate. Even the cheapest of power armors can still cost up to tens of thousands of bottle caps and require valuable raw material to create and maintain, and it would be foolish to risk losing them to inexperienced recruits with power-tripping fantasies. Therefore, Knight James will have to wait for his turn until he is fully entrusted with one. But Knight James doesn't mind much. The power armors look too clunky and he prefers to be light and nimble, just as he once was as a scavenger. And due to his invaluable survival experience in the wastelands, instead of garrison duty like most fresh knights, Knight James is immediately assigned to a scouting unit. Still, as the newest member of the squad, the rest of his squad mates, all who were born into the Brotherhood, all conduct a little hazing, as well as look down on him for being an outsider. But the Knight Sergeant of the squad knows better than to bully a knight personally sponsored by Paladin Kovac. Upon his first scouting mission, it doesn't take long for Knight James to quickly shut down his squad mates, demonstrating just how much he's in his natural element due to his background. After all, Knight James managed to survive a pack of super mutants, which is more of a feat than the rest of his squad can brag about. As Knight James easily disposes hostile mutants and even saves his squad mates in multiple occasions, their scorn turns into reluctant respect. After returning to the base, the Night Sergeant of his squad reports his subordinate's performance to Paladin Kovac, who is more than pleased and satisfied that his instincts were correct. For Knight James, his journey in the Brotherhood is only just beginning. After years of patrolling the wastelands, claiming new territories for the Brotherhood, recovering more pre-war technologies, now Knight Sergeant James has proven himself to be an invaluable asset for the Brotherhood, now leading his own deep recon unit to traverse uncharted parts of the Northeast and search for more likely locations of pre-war technologies. Though many Knight Sergeants choose to wear power armor, Knight Sergeant James chooses otherwise, opting instead for an advanced combat armor, once again preferring to remain light and nimble like the rest of his squad. Now, Knight Sergeant James is no longer the lost little boy he was from the Wastelands, but a man with a noble quest to rebuild the Wastelands, as well as part of a community he can now call his own. Despite his new sense of purpose, however, that's not to say Knight Sergeant James agrees with the Brotherhood's doctrine in its entirety. There are many moments when he feels the Brotherhood, especially its leadership, makes morally questionable decisions, as well as recruit outsiders not out of charity, but rather for additional talent to advance its agenda. The Brotherhood's treatment towards non-feral ghouls is especially something he vehemently opposes to. However, as a mere Knight Sergeant, James would be wise not to openly voice his opinions, lest he wishes for a demotion at best, or banishment at worst. Still, in spite of his reservations, Knight Sergeant James still believes he can do more good for the Wastelands within the Brotherhood, and serves to the best of his abilities. Perhaps one day, he can rise high enough in rank to pursue the changes he truly seeks. During one patrol, Knight Sergeant James and his squad are ambushed by a group of super mutants. Cornered and surrounded, the group has no choice but to confront the super mutants directly. At the same time, Knight Sergeant James feels a sense of deja vu. In fact, these super mutants appear eerily familiar, until it finally dawns on him that these are the same super mutants that once attacked him all those years ago. The very fated day when Paladin Kovac appeared and rescued him. The armor and gear, he recognizes them all. Suddenly, one of the super mutant roars,
You killed my brother!
The super mutants then charge, unleashing their weapons. Regardless of the odds, Knight Sergeant James and his squad are not going down without a fight. They were going to prove just why the Brotherhood was feared and respected in the Wastelands. And these ogres were going to be a part of their demonstration. For Knight Sergeant James, if this was his last day on Earth, he was going to ensure he'd take out as many as he could before reaching the fate of his late scavenger friends.
Well, I made it this far.
Muttered James before declaring,
Ad Victorium! Ad Victorium! Ad Victorium! Ad Victorium!
followed a squad. The battle begins, with both sides on the even footing. The Brotherhood recon squad's long-range weapons and fortified position allow the Knights to hold ground, disposing the first wave of super mutants. However, despite their best efforts, ammunition dries up quickly, and their defenses deteriorate, with the super mutants slowly overwhelming the Brotherhood squad. Eventually, the battle becomes a close-quarters brawl, which the super mutants eagerly take advantage of. One by one, each knight falls in battle, with Knight Sergeant James being the last man standing against a pack of 4 super mutants, who are also depleted in force. Still, Knight Sergeant James knows he's done for. He has no weapons, battered and bruised, and exhausted, barely standing on his 2 feet. No amount of willpower can possibly allow him to face a super mutant with his hands only. This is the end for him. The super mutants roar triumphantly and prepare to charge, until suddenly, everyone is interrupted by metallic thumps around them. Knight Sergeant James looks around, witnessing power armors landing one by one, but not just any power armors, as he instantly recognizes their distinct models and decors. These are Brotherhood Paladins. Without hesitation, the Paladins unleash their heavy weapons against the remaining super mutants, turning them into mincemeat. With the battle finally over, one of the Paladins reaches out to James.
Knight Sergeant James, are you alright?
The voice sounds familiar, but before he can utter a word, Knight Sergeant James's vision begins to feel wobbly before the whole world turns to black. As James slowly opens his eyes, he finds himself in an infirmary. With his senses slowly coming back, James begins to feel pain around his body, no thanks to the bludgeoning he received from the super mutants. Were it not for his combat armor, James may be mush by now. Still, the wonders of the Brotherhood's medical science has allowed James to reach a speedy recovery. Suddenly, Paladin Kovac appears, happily greeting him, and relieved to see James alive. He informs James of the events that transpired since the fateful battle, including the loss of his entire squad, who sadly did not make it. James feels a pierce in his heart, feeling immense guilt that he was unable to protect the squad, and wondering why he was the only one spared. But Paladin Kovac assures James that there was nothing he could have done to save them, and that he did his best. He also informs Knight Sergeant James that the Brotherhood leadership has been following his journey with great interest, and are very impressed by his performance against the super mutants. Therefore, the Leadership Council has decided to offer him something that many knights in the Brotherhood aspire towards to, but only a few are privileged enough to receive: becoming a paladin. James is taken aback. Why him? What could he possibly have done to deserve this? In fact, James feels quite the contrary. He doesn't feel deserving at all due to his failure to protect his recon squad against those super mutants. But Paladin Kovac suggests otherwise, stating that if his squad was still around, they'd fully support this decision, and that if James really wanted to avenge them, this was the best way to do it. Still, the choice is ultimately up to him. James ponders for a while and weighs his options. On one hand, a part of him feels uncertain about the offer. At best, James thought the most he would ever achieve was the rank of Knight Captain and lead his own company of knights, or perhaps a Knight Commander and comfortably manage a battle fort. As much as the Paladin title holds great prestige, it also comes with great responsibilities and sacrifices. Compared to conventional knights, Paladins are to completely dedicate their lives to the Brotherhood's creed, foregoing many of the indulgences that most people take for granted. It may mean serving for months, perhaps even years, away in far reaches of the wastelands in whatever capacity the Elder desires. Yet, the rewards will also be equally great, not just in material, but also in influence. As a paladin, one will finally reserve the right to be among the proverbial round table and take part in the meaningful decisions and changes that James has desired. James once again reflects on his current situation. He could decline Paladin Kovac's offer and just continue serving in his regular unit. At the same time, his entire recon squad is gone, and it feels a part of him died that day. As Paladin Kovac's words ring back to James, he wonders, perhaps if he wanted to make things right and prevent additional blunders like this from happening again, this may be the one opportunity to do so. With his mind made up, Knight Sergeant James informs Paladin Kovac of his decision, to which the latter replies,
You chose well. Your squad will be proud of you.
After receiving formal training in a power armor, participating in more metallic rituals, as well as personal appointment and blessing by the Elder himself, now Paladin James has achieved the status that many knights dream of. As a paladin, James's old unit adores him and elevate him to celebrity status. As a paladin, James has access to weapons and gear beyond what most knights can lay their hands on, including the most advanced power armors of the Brotherhood's furnaces. As a paladin, James is assigned to the most critical missions that determine the direction and fate of the Brotherhood, ranging from deep recon expeditions all the way to the Midwest regions, commanding an entire battalion of knights against super mutant hives, as well as even leading diplomatic missions towards non-hostile factions in the Wastelands, no thanks to his background in the Wastelands. But most importantly, as a paladin, James has earned a level of authority and influence to make the changes he couldn't before, such as being in charge of Wasteland survival training for Brotherhood initiates, as well as counseling the Brotherhood leadership, including the Elder himself, on policies towards outsiders. Once again, Paladin James has earned this seat at the round table of the Brotherhood. Just as when he first became a fresh knight, there are many paths and possibilities James's journey could go within the Brotherhood. If he seeks a leadership role, James could one day become a paladin commander, leading his own contingent of paladins and even an army of knights. With such command and power, James would not only decide the fate of a battle, but also the fate of an entire campaign and the years to come. If he seeks a more specialized role, James could one day become a star paladin, where he personally executes the most critical assignments from the Elder himself. Assignments so crucial and sensitive that not even paladin commanders hold authority over James. Or perhaps, the Elder may one day recognize James as the one paladin best fit to carry out his personal will and bestow upon him the title of Sentinel. A title so mythical that many in the Brotherhood dismiss it as rumors. Or, if he dared, perhaps James could one day decide to pursue the top job for himself and become the Elder of the very Brotherhood. Yet, at the same time, James's long tenure in the Brotherhood has also allowed him to experience the Order in its entirety, especially the less rosy parts. Although James was never under any illusion that the Brotherhood was infallible, becoming a paladin himself has exposed him to some of the unpleasant truths behind it all. From its ideological dogma to the greedy gatekeeping of pre-war technologies to morally reprehensible decisions by the Elder. And most aggravating of it all the internal politics within the leadership. Having once believed that he could do good within the Brotherhood, and perhaps even make positive changes within the system, cracks of doubt begin to form within James. He begins to doubt whether the Brotherhood of Steel are actually the morally righteous saviors of the wastelands as they claim to be, or rather hoarding all the technologies for its own self-indulgence. He begins to doubt whether he is actually making the wastelands a better place, or remaining in the Brotherhood more out of self-preservation than anything. James reflects on his life, having once started from a skinny young teen barely surviving on scraps in the wastelands, to now being one of the most powerful and influential figures within the Brotherhood. He then ponders about the future, and whether it is worth continuing this journey. If he truly desired, James could hang up his power armor and leave the Brotherhood and rejoin the wastelands as a scavenger once more. But then, he remembers the fateful day he first encountered Paladin Kovac. Were it not for him, James would not be alive right now. It is because of good men like Paladin Kovac that many wastelanders have been saved from doom and given a chance to live another day. It is because of good men like Paladin Kovac that James was inspired to do the same and follow his example. Yes, the Brotherhood of Steel is far from perfect, and Paladin James will not always be able to steer the Order in ways he wants to. But as long as good men like Paladin Kovac are within the Order, there is still a chance to do good, and Paladin James will continue the fight, not just to protect technology, but also to protect those who cannot protect themselves, just as the legendary founder Arthur Maxson did. And that finally ends the story of Paladin James. Pretty inspiring, huh? Well then, I hope his story has got some of you a little bit more encouraged now. Yes, the Brotherhood of Steel is quite militaristic, as well as harboring an unhealthy level of obsession towards technology. That said, the Wastelands is quite hazardous and unforgiving for the faint of heart. And if a walking tank manages to save you from its dangers, especially a pack of super mutants, I imagine most of you would be inclined to join him if you have the chance, just as young James did. Therefore, if you think you've got what it takes to suit up in advanced power armor, gear up with some of the best weapons the Wastelands has to offer, discover long-lost pre-war technologies in the Wastelands, crush the skulls of any super mutants daring to ambush you, but also serving as a shining beacon of hope for the vulnerable of the Wastelands, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Brotherhood of Steel, so good luck, initiates. Ad Victoriam. Holy crap, they've built them already? Damn, they're fast. Well then, if you would excuse me, I'm gonna take my brand new power armor for a spin. Thank you to my patrons on Patreon for supporting this channel. My $5 patrons are Kapitan Sladek, Kitsap, and Chocobird. My $2 patrons are Komida the Prep Cook Demon. If you would like to appear at the end credits of my videos, as well as have early access and exclusive content on Patreon, feel free to hop on over to patreon.com/LTELawrence and give a pledge. Your support is greatly appreciated. If you would like to see my artwork as well, feel free to check out my other platforms like DeviantArt for my entire gallery. Thanks for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Until next time, this is T. Lawrence signing out. Have a good one.